Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Let's Start Justice. The weather is cool and the traffic is bad in Kingston, so you know that we are upon another Christmas season here. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director for JFJ.
And I'm Jade Williams, the Policy and Advocacy Specialist at JFJ.
Now, as you're aware, the government reimposed the state of public emergency. And exactly 1 week after, the regulations are yet to be tabled in the lower house. It was tabled just last Friday in the Senate. So there are no regulations governing the state of public emergency. So I think JFJ had posed some questions to the Prime Minister, the Minister with Information Responsibility, as well as the Minister of National Security via Twitter. We hadn't gotten a response, but we had asked the government whether or not persons have since been detained under the current SOE, what is governing the current SOE, and if persons were in fact detained, what powers would have allowed that detention, whether it is the Jamaica Constabulary Force Act or these regulations that remain an elusive piece of legislation to really govern the SOE. So the lawfulness and legality, for a better word, of the SOE is questionable. The bail bill is still before the Joint Select Committee.
Yes, I believe there's a session today, actually.
They have another.
Yes.
But the law school, the faculty,
Yes.
as well as JAMBAR, the Jamaica Bar Association, made their presentation in the past week. And they also question whether or not this bill can withstand a constitutional challenge.
From the little I was able to hear of today's proceedings, there were similar questions being posed today as well.
Which agencies we have
Can't
today?
quite recall.
But I want to urge the persons to continue.
Yes.
The producer is saying Arlene Harrison, who also sat on the committee of JAMBAR, is presenting today, Karan, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. In what capacity? Not sure. Okay. All right. But you see, the concerns are coming in. So I hope the Joint Select Committee, again, they have very good intentions, but they must listen to what is being said and being guided by other things. Now, the last thing I want to point out, I'm not sure if you got the chance to read that Indicom Q3 report.
I've skimmed it. I won't say I've read it.
No, I read it in great detail.
As usual.
Because, and Gleaner had a headline there, killer cops. Yeah. Quite, as usual. But
inflammatory.
But it's concerning. It's two things that I want to point out here. You're seeing an increasing number of fatal shootings by security forces. Last year, we had 127 persons killed by the security forces. As at November this year, it's at 126, which means it's a clear indication that more persons will be killed by the security forces. Now, the National Security Minister had said that the Jamaican population should brace for more because intelligence apparently is leading to the police having greater interaction with criminal elements. My estimation of intelligence, though, is that it will lead to more people.
I should hope
going
that
before the courts, not necessarily meaning more people will be
in
killed.
support of evidence for the court and not necessarily such intelligence that would lead to a fatal confrontation.
Exactly. But what was interesting, Jade and listeners, is what the Indicom report said about core police officers. And there was an insinuation that they're almost executioners, if you will. And I'm being very careful with the language I'm using now. Indicom, as an oversight body, mentioned that 250, and let me go, I have it on my phone here, 250 police officers were involved in fatalities. Now, they did mention that most of those officers, this is their first time. So that is not necessarily alarming. But what was alarming, though, was that 14 of the 250 officers accounted for 112 deaths. But it doesn't stop there. The report goes on to say of the 129 men shot, 19 of them had no gun or other weapon. 17 of the 129 men were reported as being in possession of a weapon other than a firearm, which means they had less lethal weapon than the police. There was another section in the report that mentioned that you had persons who were mentally ill as well. Now, we all recognize that you must deal with things on a case-by-case basis. But if 14 officers, and it suggests that a number of these officers are from particular units and police stations, 3 of those 5 to 6 units or police stations that were named in Indicom's report, JFJ has also gotten several complaints. Not just JFJ, but other agencies that work in the HIV sector that mention, for example, that persons within the LGBTQ community have raised concerns that they were being violated and victimized in different ways. So I think this is something that the High Command must respond to. But what is also concerning in the report is that Indicom mentioned that they have flagged these issues over the years and seemingly no critical response has been provided. But there are some areas that I believe Indicom's report should quickly address. For example, it noted that there were 41 police officers in questionable shootings, but the report only detailed the current status of 11. So I raised the question, what is happening with the other 30? Was it a case where charges could not be brought forward because of witnesses not coming forward, because of shoddy investigation, because of lack of cooperation from the JCF? I think that level of detail will answer some of the questions that persons are posing, that perhaps Indicom is being an alarmist. And I value the work of Indicom, so I would urge Indicom to answer some of those critical questions so that the confidence that I personally have and JFJ has in the agency is shared among the general public. That's all I want to say from my end this week.
That's all. But what I will say is that I do hope that regardless of whether we end up judging some of the parameters of the report to be quote-unquote alarmist, I would hope that the general idea that officers would need, I think, additional training to ensure that where there is a disproportionate weaponry, somebody unarmed versus somebody with a firearm, that there would be some greater
Police
training
Commissioner said that they're adequately trained.
Well, I should hope that this would indicate that there should be at least
more.
Something more.
And the body cameras that we have been calling for.
Right, because maybe, as you said, it has to be a case-by-case basis. So we really don't know what the circumstances were.
And you shouldn't be expecting police officers, for their own protection, to be pulling out their phones
to record. Yes, no,
so
absolutely.
For the police officers as well, I urge you to stand with that call for the body-worn cameras. It protects you, not just the citizens, but you and your livelihood. Yes?
Yep. And I would say that we're not too far off for our topic for today, which we're talking about crime again. We spoke about crime last week, about solutions, and this week we're again talking about solutions, but from a different perspective. And with that in mind, I would say we have our right of the day, which is the right to freedom of religion. And it states that every person shall have the right to freedom of religion, including the freedom to change their religion, either alone or in a community with others, in public and in private, and to worship, to teach and practice and observe that religion. And I'll quickly give our trivia question for the week, which is, when was the first Human Rights Day celebrated? And the options are A, December 10, 1960, December 10, 1955, or C, December 10, 1950. So you can send a WhatsApp to 876-239-7583 or respond on our social medias at Jamaicans for Justice. And whoever wins will receive $1,000 credit at the end of the show.
Yeah, you need that credit in the Christmas. But we're going to take a break, and then when we return, we continue with the topic.
Yes.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We are discussing the topic of the role of the church in addressing crime, prevention as well as control. And we're going to be joined by Reverend Newton Dixon as well as Mr. Adrian Freighter. And let's just begin with the conversation. Now, we recognize that crime in Jamaica continues to be an issue that requires special attention, and currently Jamaica tops the Latin America and the Caribbean in terms of murders. It has been pointed out as an irony that Jamaica also has the most churches per square mile. Speaking at a conference on religion and crime prevention held at the Northern Caribbean University in 2019, Minister of National Security Horace Chang called on the faith-based organizations to recognize their value and potential in being agents of change, capable of preventing and suppressing criminal behavior. He also issued the call for these organizations to partner with the government in the fight against crime and criminality.
One of the tenets widely attributed to the church, of course, is that of ensuring and maintaining conformity to a level of social norms, which is true. The Western society, our laws are based on moral and ethical principles which emerge from the Christian faith. And much of our behavior, don't correct, is if you behave yourself in a manner that is socially acceptable, you'll not be in criminal activity.
Minister Chang further reiterated that in many low-income communities, the church is the only stable institution with a transformative capacity. This is because the church is uniquely positioned as an institution where persons who may otherwise not find common ground can find common ground.
Now, philosopher Adrian Barden posits that a bedrock of religion is the notion that all behavior comes from one's belief system, and as a result, crime comes from a negative way of thinking. Given one of the mandates of the church is that of molding and shaping beliefs, what greater role can these institutions play in addressing issues that influence crime? As we stated earlier, we are joined in studio by Reverend Newton Dixon, who is the General Secretary of the Jamaica Council of Churches, and we have on call with us Mr. Adrian Frater, who is a member of the Peace Community Crime and Violence Committee of the Association of Christian Communicators and Media. And I believe Mr. Frater's organization held a beautiful forum just last week, Sunday, I believe, and we're going to be having some discussion. Welcome again.
Thank you, Michael.
Mr. Frater, are you with us?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Frater, let us start with you. Can you just give us a quick rundown of what happened on Sunday, December 11th, and what was the objective of that forum?
Okay, as you rightly said, the Association of Christian Communication and Media is an organization that is designed to look at alternative ways of treating conditions that we are facing in Jamaica presently. It is a new voice offering a new perspective. The group's mantra is to foster the growth and development of resources that you can use to make Jamaica a safe place again.
Yes.
In 1962, when Jamaica became independent, we were the safest place on the earth in terms of murders. The murder rate, I think, was 3.9 per 100,000. Fast forward 4 decades later, 2005, we were seeing 1,674 murders at a rate of 58 per 100,000, which made us at that time the most murderous place on the face of the earth.
Yes.
So we have been trying a lot of things to get crime and violence under control with varying degree of success. Now the media group, the ACCM, is now coming out and offering a fresh perspective. We believe that the church can play a very, very strong role in curtailing these out of control situations, including restoring the family, getting into the school system, creating group for mentorship and things like that. So the ACSM is all about a new solution. In our eyes, we are probably the new crime plan.
All right. I like it. Reverend Dixon, from the JCC has been a critical support, we believe, in social change. We know of the Council of Churches within the HIV sector, for example, advocating for the less vulnerable. And recently the church came out against the state of emergency in terms of how it was declared. What is your position broadly regarding crime before we get into some of the details?
Thank you. And let me say good afternoon to Brother Frater, as well as to the listeners all over the world. Let me start by answering a question with the general idea that what churches speak about is the dignity of the human person. We confess that everybody is created in the image and likeness of God. And therefore, everything we do should support an environment where human dignity can be affirmed. We must have a social environment, a political environment, an economic environment. Every aspect of life must affirm human dignity. And anywhere anything denies or diminishes that affirmation, we should either speak out against it or get into activism that tries to reverse or diminish and find ways to address those issues. So my position as a Christian and as a leader in the Christian community is that crime, as it is in Jamaica, all crime, is inimical, is against human flourishing. Any kind of harm that we encounter is against our dignity as human being and the right to life and the basic human rights.
Absolutely.
Which we are entitled to, not just from scripture, but which we have enshrined in our constitutive document, that we have the right to life, the freedom of speech, and so on. And once something threatens those rights, we have to stand up and speak against it.
Perfectly said. Jade?
Yes, so I heard Mr. Freighter talking about some of the ways in which the church could be involved, that he's already seen, getting involved in schools and community groups. But I grew up around a very Christian mother who has been very involved in her church. And part of their work has always been impacting the community around them. And I know that to be a general tenet of churches. So I wonder what more could be done, or what is hindering? What is the
new crime plan?
Yeah, what is hindering its influence now? Because I know that some of the churches are already out there.
What we need is we need an honest discourse. We know we know the role of the church and what the church has been doing, but maybe in some of the things that the church do, they have left the community behind. What they really need to do is to bring the community. When you talk about the family is not just the church family, it is also the wider community. Now, you can't have a member of your choir who is coming to church and singing every day, but that person's son is the young leader in the community. The church need to call out such a person and say, listen, these two things can't work together. We need to have a very honest discussion. I live in St. James, which happens to be Jamaica's crime capital. And I know that the church has been very active down here, but somewhere along the line, we are missing the boat. The church is almost an entity that competes with all women. The men are missing. The young boys are missing. We need to find a way to bring the men back into the church, the boys back into the church, because if they are not under your view, then you have very little control over them. So we need to start. The outreach program should not be only those who are interested. We must go out there and create interest. In St. James, where I live, the social activities in the community are driven primarily by people who get their monies through all strange kind of sources. The church needs to displace them and be that agent in the community that governs the community football group, the homework program, the back to school activities. In other words, the church needs to make these people irrelevant. And that is where it should start.
Oh, I was going to say that's something that we've heard a lot, and that a lot of social programs in communities are supported by the activities of criminals. And I wonder if Reverend Dixon has any opinion on that. Is that something that you have also observed?
Yes. I think, though, that we have created in many communities a vacuum, a moral vacuum and a social vacuum that has caused these, and in some cases nefarious entities and persons to fill those vacuum. And I agree with my brother Freighter. Churches are physically present, but very often they are not, their presence is not felt. And I am going to make a slightly controversial statement here, at the risk of losing my job when I leave here. Because you'll hire me. Yes. Praise the Lord. Let's go. Because I don't think enough of our churches are focused on the environment around them. And we say this all the time. Too many of us are preparing the people to transition from earth to heaven. And nothing is wrong with that. That is biblical, that is sound, and that is good. But between here and there is a long journey called life. And as far as we know, Jesus said he has come that we might have life and have it abundantly. Here so. So I think...
Reverend, let us hold that thought for me. We have to take the break and
Sure,
then we'll
sure.
pick up. Welcome back. We're discussing the role of the church in crime prevention and control. We're joined by Mr. Adrian Frater and Reverend Newton. Now, Rev, you were discussing earlier what the church can do differently. And during the break, we were having a conversation about how the church can better reach our youngsters with perhaps a change in how it ministers.
Yes.
Where you meet people where they are.
Absolutely.
What can be done?
I think, as we were saying earlier, I think what the pandemic has helped us to see is the need to pivot from the traditional to the innovative. Churches have to be, just as regular society, marketing companies innovate because, as we say, necessity is the mother of invention. We have to do the same, and I think where churches can do much better is focus our attention on how particularly certain target groups are communicate.
Yes.
And I absolutely think that there should be a TikTok church going on somewhere. There should be a church on Instagram, and I know some churches are very adept at using technology. But I don't think enough of us have learned those lessons, because the youngsters are moving further and further and faster away from the traditional. Yes. And that is something all over the world. Yes. We need to not just follow them, but be ahead of them in terms of how we get their attention and appeal to their minds. Yes. And just as you said, the core values of the scriptures and the core values of faith don't change. Truth is always truth, right is always right, justice is always justice, scriptural, biblical principles. But how we communicate these are what is what needs to change. Yes. And we must find more relevant ways, the ways that are that young people use to communicate, to get the message to them.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely think we must not stop. And this is where I'm firm and resolute and unequivocal. There's enough fuel out in the world to keep evil rolling and growing and mushrooming. We cannot afford to stop with the values, the core values, the promotion of values, the rights, the principles, the precepts that will help our society. And if I might just jump in with a quick word ahead of you. I think fundamentally what church should be doing is taking care of every child where a family is having a challenge.
Yes.
Every child, every single child needs to come under the influence of a moral entity that helps that child to frame the world around some principles. And this is where churches must help families. Families are in trouble in Jamaica.
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Frater, if I may, and one of the challenges and realities, though, is that, and by the way, I personally recognize, and history has shown us that the church has been very important in championing change and ensuring that the most vulnerable get support. Certainly, if you look at our school system in Jamaica, I think 9 out of 10 schools, it started as a result of the intervention of the church. But the reality is that in some instance, you find that persons within the church, based on their own moral and religious standards, do preach that hate and division. What is the role within the church itself to get its membership, its congregation, to be singing the same tune as you're articulating, Mr. Frater? What is the church doing to start from within? Mr. Frater?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, you were muted. Yes.
That is the role of this organization.
Yes.
To really create another avenue by which we can reach out to the wider society. The church needs to be bold and assertive For example, every year we have these prayer breakfasts, and then the government or the public officials outline glamorous plans what they are going to do to tackle crime and violence and so on. And once the prayer breakfast is over, it's the end of it. The church needs to be bold and let them know, listen, we are not going to continue this tradition unless you honor your commitment. There are so many community organizations out there crying out for help that the government can provide. But they're not doing it. The church needs to be in their face and say, we are telling you this. If you are not going to play your role, then we are not going to be into any partnership with you. The church is supposed to be the most respected organization in the community. At least it was when I was growing up as a child. And if there's one organization in Jamaica I know the government would be afraid to confront publicly, is the church. So the church have that leverage and they must use that leverage. You can't go to a prayer breakfast and they make a promise and they don't keep it, and next year you go back, they make other promises and they don't keep it. The church needs to be forceful in its representation, and until that happens, you need to hold the members' feet to the fire, you need to hold the community's feet to the fire, and so on and so forth. There's a situation some time ago in a community in St. James called Rosites. We have a very bold pastor, Nollis King, of the Rosites Full Gospel Church.
Yes.
He called a community meeting and he told them outright, listen, I am not going to bury one more gunshot victim in this community unless we form an organization to tackle the problems that we are facing.
Yes.
And out of that came the Rosites Covenant of Peace.
Yes.
That community was having like 16 murders in 3 weeks. And after the organization was formed for 1 full year, there was not a single murder in that community. Community members were doing, what do you call that? Arresting people. They found somebody in the community with a gun, they hold on to that person and call the police. Everybody became a community protector, and that lasted for a year and a little more. But sadly, because of lack of corporate support, the homework program they started fell by the wayside. The program to assist girls who fell out of school and were not without skills, they were teaching them basic skills, that fell by the wayside. The church need to confront the corporate Jamaica and say, listen, if you want a peaceful Jamaica, you must invest in a peaceful Jamaica.
Mr. Freighter, I don't mean to be controversial, but is the church receiving any funds through the zones of special operations, social interventions, for example?
I am not aware of that, and I'd rather doubt it. I'm a former media worker. I retired from media at the end of last year.
Yes.
I'm not so sure. There's a program that is run by Mr. Sweeney where they fix community centers, break down zinc fences, replace them with concrete structure and so on. I know that is happening. But what I think need to happen is that these business people need to contribute more. For example, in St. James, the people who sell motor car, sell building block, steel, concrete and those things, they make serious amount of money out of these people who we term scammers. To the point where they see them as necessary evil. I am saying that you need to put back some of those monies invest in the communities so that we can make better communities. The church needs to be the option to the breakaway into antisocial activities.
Yes.
And the community leaders must come along too. We can't be in a country where the police have recovered over 1,000 guns between now and 1980. Over 19,000 guns between now and 1986. Over 1,000 rifles. It can't be that we put everything in the hands of the police. They are doing a lot already. The other players of influence need to get involved, and those include
It's
the
a
business
collective effort, yes.
Right.
Absolutely. Rev, anything to add to that point in terms of the role of the church and the support from corporate Jamaica and other communities?
I agree with Brother Freighter. I agree with him. And what I would add is this. To the government's credit, there are some policy initiatives which will promote greater peace and harmony and development. For example, the citizens, can't remember the name, but let's just say what we have seen is, especially through the PIOJ, he mentioned Mr. Sweeney's
Jamaica Social Investment,
Fund. There are these broad policy initiatives that we think all of us can look to and find where our niche, our connection, our dovetail can take place and work, because I don't think we can keep staying in the silos. The denominations all have projects and programs, but I think what we really need is the national focus, where all of us look at what the nation says are the priorities and we bring our church ministries in alignment with those. So I am looking forward to the opportunities that the leadership of the national political leadership, national church leadership will take to bring all of us together to find out where our place is in that national development process.
All right, thank you. Last word from you, Mr. Freighter, before we go to the break. Rev will be with us this season studio. We'll capture him until 2 o'clock when he can go and watch the World Cup. So last word from you.
I am just hopeful that through this initiative that the ACCM has launched, that we will be able to make a positive contribution to restoring Jamaica. When I was a child growing up, the church was held in great reverence in the community. A man was coming along and he was cussing. Once he was in the precinct of the church, he would stop cussing. You wouldn't see a man walk past the church smoking a cigarette. I'm not saying that we need to go back to those days, but surely the church must reclaim its position as one of the bastions in the community of moral. It should be the moral springboard in the community. Right, it should be the moral compass. That is where the church needs to get back. And we should not be thinking about, this denomination and that denomination and so on. We need to function as a collective. And until the church comes with one vision to tackle the problems that we are facing, we need to be bold, as I said before. We need to be honest. We need to be in the faces of the policy makers and say, listen, you need to play your role. We cannot surrender the country to criminals and then we complain. We really need to go back. We really need to go back and take away the power. The powers that they got it through our politics.
Yes.
It started out as activists throwing stones at each other till it became, guns came into play, until these guys became independent. They found lottery scamming, they found drug smuggling, and they have now declared independence from the politicians. They can operate on their own. They don't need political handout again. So we need to collectively take back that power from them. We need to make crime and violence less attractive. And that is the first step. And the first step in that process is to reclaim the family.
All right, perfect.
The church, the school, and all of them must reclaim the family, or we are fighting a losing battle.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Freighter, giving us the tool, if you will, in terms of those critical social institutions. All right, we're going to take a break.
We take the break?
Yes, we're behind.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We've been speaking today about solutions to crime and how the church can play a role in those solutions. We're at the calling part of our show, but remember we have a surprise for you at the end. So the calling is only going to last 5 minutes, so make your calls as quickly as possible. Send your comments to...
And Rev will answer.
And Rev will answer, yes. Send your comments to WhatsApp at 876-239-7583, or you can call the studio line at 876-676-4996. So I have 2 comments here that came into our social media page. I'm going to start with the one relevant to today's topic. And this person says, our public view today was about how the church could be more involved in addressing the issue of crime. And this person said that JFJ and the churches need to go into the garrison communities and inform persons about their rights. Also, you need to inform people not to resist arrest, because this will get them killed, because the officers have a right to defend themselves. So I before you guys answer the speak to the church and the garrison part, I just want to say that JFJ has always done public education in all sorts of socioeconomic communities, and we have always preached not to resist a lawful arrest.
Yes,
That
and
is-
I'm happy you said the word lawful, because the police officers do have a responsibility, though, to ensure
lawfully carry out
lawfully
an
carry their
arrest.
duties with respect to persons without violating their rights. So,
Yes, absolutely. So that is not something that we are not aligned with, and something that we've consistently preached. But
why are you using the word preach? Is it because you sit on beside Reverend Jade?
Yeah.
So
okay.
sometimes the vocabulary is influence. It's influence. But I will say, Rev, what are your thoughts about the church going into communities that because what I imagine they want you to do is something like what we do,
Right.
which we're underground,
Right.
so walking around, speaking to people, engaging with them. What do you think about that? Does the church have the resources
Let
for
me
that?
piggyback on your word. It's not my word. Preach. I think we preach too much inside the four walls of the church. We can take the messages of righteousness and peace and justice outside the four walls a little more, maybe a lot more in some communities. So yes, but there are a lot of churches that do that in those garrison communities. I was at a meeting on Saturday where a pastor shared how she's like the bridge, no pun intended, between one community in Southside and another. And sometimes it's only she can, as the brother said up the hills, can cross it. And she functions in that space because it is critical that she's able to bring, to make life pass from one place to the next. Churches have that role to play. It's dangerous sometimes, and it is also underfunded and under-resourced, but it's something we can't stop doing.
Absolutely.
I
Any other comments?
no, not at this time, but we do have a winner for our trivia.
Okay.
So I don't know if you'd like us to share that. So
But I think before you go, Rev,
yeah.
my son asked me this question about the role of the church with the grooming. He's very upset about it because he believes that when he speaks at school, he's somehow being treated as this naughty person.
Right.
So I don't know what would be your advice. I will take this little clip of the show and bring to him this evening.
I am intimidated by youngsters because their questions are usually a little more in the currency than. But here's my position, Mikhail.
Yes.
I think our conversation around some of those issues that impinge on our culture and history must be brought and furthered in earnest. And I think, for example, the issue of how we grow here must bear in mind who we are as African people.
Yes.
So what was normal or what was acceptable 40 years ago has shifted a little.
Yes.
And it don't mean that because somebody's ear is locked, that them morally, it is a reflection of their moral compass. The hair is a choice of an appearance. And I think we really have to sort out that conversation about what it means for us to be black people with the hair we have and how we carry it.
Okay.
Because much of how we carry it is reflective of a historical past that is not us.
And he challenges me when I want to take him to the barber.
Same thing? Same thing?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rev. So we
My
go
pleasure.
now to our trivia question. Our winner this week was Kamala B. And so our comms officer will be reaching out with your credit. And the question was, when was the first Human Rights Day celebrated? We just celebrated one last week, Saturday. And the first Human Rights Day was celebrated December 10th, 1950.
And that was 2 years after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Okay,
Very,
scholar.
very important. I don't think so. You just read often enough.
Well, I'm gonna prevent us from taking up the time,
Yes.
because I would love for us to get to showcase something. So what we're gonna show today.
No, we're going to close out now and then we just go straight into it. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
All
So
right.
I'm Jade Williams,
And I'm
policy and
Mikkel.
advocacy specialist.
And I'm Mikhail Jackson, Executive Director. And of course, Rev, thank you so much
I
for
was
coming.
privileged and blessed and honored to be here.
Oh, Lordy. I can't manage.
Believe me, this is an epic moment for me. I want another one soon.
Represent sweet talking. Anyway,
Some of that involved in the gospel too.
Yes.
Talk sweet.
all right, enjoy your week.